a devoted mother with a bright future in show business.
She was very much a rising star.
She was loved by a lot of people.
Is viciously attacked in her own home.
She had put up a fight.
She struggled very hard to try to live.
I was beyond shocked that this could happen to such an amazing human. I mean, why?
Police single out several suspects.
The boyfriend began to wash his hands before police arrived on the scene.
A bitter divorce, custody battles, money, these are all motives for murder.
We appreciate you coming and talking to us, man, but we got some problems.
What's the truth? What happened?
Just when detectives think they have the killer in sight.
I need to start complaining while your cell phone and her cell phone take. I don't know. All right.
The investigation takes a jaw-dropping turn.
And it was a murder from a Hollywood movie.
It was definitely bizarre.
It was just unexpected.
Only a twisted person could pull something like this off.
Nashville, Tennessee is the vibrant heart and soul of country music. In complete contrast, just a few miles away, is the suburban calm of Hermitage.
Hermitage is about 20-30 minutes outside of town, and it was a quiet place.
It doesn't have the hustle and bustle of downtown Nashville. It's an upscale, nice area to live in that didn't really have that much crime.
That all changes one quiet Sunday afternoon.
I was working that afternoon when the call came in.
The victim's boyfriend found her deceased and called 911.
When I'd walked inside the residence, I found the victim dead inside the living room area. There was blood next to her, and it appeared she had several gunshot wounds.
When I looked at the victim's body, I noticed multiple bullet holes, multiple projectile strikes. I also noticed powder burns on one of her hands.
There was gunshot residue on her hands, which would indicate she attempted to grab the gun.
The curtains had been pulled down, and some chairs had been moved around, like a struggle had started. It appeared she had put up a fight with the suspect. We began looking for a murder weapon. We could not find one.
We realized that the assailant picked up shell casings and removed them from the scene to make it harder on investigators to determine what happened. We were lucky. We found one shell casing that rolled to the edge of the wall, and it was sort of hidden, so the suspect wasn't able to find that one. It had a green sheen, and I thought it was an old brass shell casing that was corroded. We turned it over for the test.
We knew upon locating that shell casing that we were now going to have a clue that we could follow up on.
We noticed there was money on the counter, and there was other valuables, jewelry, a ring, so it didn't appear that robbery was a motive.
Investigators follow a trail of evidence from outside the house.
The victim's vehicle was parked in the garage. The vehicle's door was open, and it appeared that items from her purse were strewn across the floor of the garage.
It appeared that she was targeted, followed to her residence, and the suspect took the most opportune time to gain entry once the garage was opened, and she pulled in.
Detectives want more information from the victim's boyfriend. He tells police his girlfriend is 39-year-old Veronica Boza. They had plans to go out that day.
He stated when he arrived at the residence, the back garage was up. He noticed the victim's vehicle was parked. The door was open.
Upon entering the residence, he found the victim deceased.
Obviously, he's a suspect for us. He was the one that found the victim, and the red flags are up for us as detectives.
But Brian's too overwhelmed to say much more.
We can't rule him out because we don't know the history and don't know what happened.
We knew we were going to have to conduct an interview. with the boyfriend later on.
Veronica was originally from Milan, Italy. Veronica was very religious. She was Catholic. I think her faith is what led her to be so sweet and kind and help others. She was just a beam of light, happy, happy, happy.
Veronica had a lot of energy. And of course, she was from Italy. So she had this accent, and everybody from here was like, wow, where are you from?
At 23, Veronica moved to the U.S. to pursue her dream of working in the entertainment industry as a TV producer.
When I first met Veronica, she was entry level in the production industry. She took to it really well.
Veronica was very much a rising star. You just wanted to work with her.
She would boss you around and you'd like it. She'd tell you what to do and you'd be like, okay,
But work wasn't the center of Veronica's life. Her loved ones were.
Veronica had a lot of friends. She was loved by a lot of people and respected.
In 1994, Veronica got married, and 7 years later, she welcomed a son.
I think Veronica was very happy. She wanted her family, her son, her husband. It was the whole thing. Veronica's son was the end all for her. Like, she would walk through fire for him.
After 15 years of marriage, Veronica and her husband Tim separated, but they were successfully co-parenting their 8-year-old son. Officers confirmed the boy was with his father during the time of the murder. As news of Veronica's death sinks in, her loved ones struggle with the loss.
I was beyond shocked that this could happen to such an amazing human. I mean, why? Why? That's really what I sit with. Why?
To hear this news was like a punch in the gut. I was stunned.
At the crime scene, investigators make a startling discovery. Veronica was a victim of a random mugging and robbery just months before her murder.
We noticed a letter from the state saying the subject that was arrested for robbing her was going to be released on parole.
The person was armed and took property from her, and ultimately the suspect was arrested in the robbery and Veronica prosecuted.
Was the attacker out of jail the day Veronica was murdered?
This was definitely an angle we had to look into and to see his whereabouts and if he had ever made any statements toward Veronica after he had been arrested.
This definitely was a motive that could be related to the homicide.
Coming up, an old friend with a troubling past draws suspicion.
We found out that he had a large number of physical assaults against women.
Then investigators uncover a web of deceit
This was significant because it showed that he was lying about where he was.
that leads to a killer hiding in plain sight.
We then noticed that his phone was in the general area of the crime scene.
She admitted that she stole her ex-husband's handgun.
It's like, what?
After finding TV producer and loving mother Veronica Boza gunned down in her living room, detectives are trying to establish if a criminal from her past has taken his revenge.
We definitely had to look into seeing if he was out to harm Veronica. We started to do a background investigation on him. He was a dangerous person.
But when investigators dig deeper, they are forced to reassess.
We were able to find records showing that he was in jail during the day of the murder.
With a key suspect eliminated, detectives now focus on reconstructing their victim's final hours.
We found out that Veronica attended St. Edward's Church, and that's where she dropped her son off with his father after church service that Sunday before she was murdered.
Her boyfriend. Brian had spoken with Veronica right after she had left church.
She also spoke to a coworker during her drive.
We were able to learn when her last call was made, and then from Brian's when the 911 call was made.
From this information, detectives pieced together a timeline. Veronica was alive at 12:08 and dead by 12:20.
So there was a 12-minute span that we were able to narrow down of when this murder took place.
Due to the very limited time frame that the homicide could have occurred, the suspect would have been definitely rushed for time to perpetrate the act.
With Brian arriving just moments after Veronica's death, police question how he could have missed spotting her assailant.
So we needed to speak with her boyfriend. We had to interview him and exclude him as a suspect, if possible, or keep him as a suspect.
Brian agrees to go down to the station for further questioning.
You could visibly see he was upset.
Detectives begin by asking about Brian and Veronica's relationship.
Brian was also a TV producer, and they worked on a show together, and then that's how they met.
They had just started dating 2 to 3 months earlier, and they were getting ready to go on a weekend trip.
I've never been loved the way that she loves me. Never felt so strongly about a relationship. We moved very quickly and hadn't fought our hearts on it.
Though Brian appears to be the grieving boyfriend, they still do not have evidence to eliminate him as a suspect.
Did you see her at all today?
No. So
When was the last time you saw her?
Sundays are usually when we reunite.
He stated that he talked to Veronica after she dropped off her son near the church, and they were talking about a short trip they were going to take. He left a friend's house, and he was heading to Veronica's house. Along the way, he stopped and purchased a cold drink at a market, and then spoke with Veronica on the phone, and then he pulled up to the residence.
Walked in, looked to the right, saw her on the ground. I screamed for her name, and then went over to her. I saw the state she was in. I believe she was still alive up until a few moments before I walked in the door.
When police ask how Brian knew Veronica was dead, his answer is troubling.
At first, the boyfriend didn't check the victim to see if she was breathing or if she was now deceased.
When Brian called 911, the 911 operator asked him, "Is she breathing?" Only then did Brian check for a pulse, and he didn't find a pulse.
And then he began to wash his hands before police arrived on the scene.
He didn't perform any type of medical assistance to Veronica. It would seem odd.
Did you hurt Veronica today? Did you have?
No. And she's the love of my life. We plan to spend the rest of our life together.
Brian insists he had nothing to do with Veronica's death. He's then very quick to offer up another suspect.
Had she had any disagreements with anybody that you know of?
Ted Rose.
As we were interviewing Brian, he brought up the soon-to-be ex-husband as a person that we might want to look at as being involved in the homicide.
Brian had stated that Veronica and Tim were going through a rough divorce.
He said the divorce was contentious between Tim and Veronica, and he knew there was issues relating to the custody of their son.
Brian tells the detectives that he and Veronica were worried that Tim was capable of terrible things.
I've been very cautious for the past 6 months. I've been keeping an eye out to see if there was anybody there. I always felt like maybe he was the kind of guy that was going to have somebody there, like surveillance or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
That raised red flags and piqued our interest. A bitter divorce, custody battles, money, these are all motives for murder. We wanted to interview him. Obviously, Tim, he was a suspect to us at this time due to his relationship with Veronica.
Police investigating the homicide of TV producer Veronica Boza are interrogating her boyfriend, Brian Robinson.
I was freaking out. Just like, oh my God.
He points the finger at Veronica's soon-to-be ex-husband, Tim Boza.
We found out that the divorce was within a few weeks to a month of being finalized, and that the divorce was going to be favorable to Veronica.
Brian tells police Tim isn't happy about the settlement or the custody arrangement.
When Veronica refused to submit to him to just being a split, he then attempted to tarnish her as a mother.
With nothing to tie him to the murder, Brian is released. Officers are dispatched to check his alibi, while detectives look into Tim Boza.
We found out that he was a home remodeler and worked for himself, basically.
Investigators learn that Tim and Veronica's marriage became strained in the last year and a half.
We found that Tim had hit a rough patch in his work. Some of his houses weren't selling. He was starting to have money issues.
Her life was taking off and going a really good direction, and Mr. Boza's life was doing the exact opposite.
12 months before the murder, Veronica filed for divorce.
The reason they had started the divorce was the financial situation Tim had put the family in with this business.
His business is basically going down the tubes.
He fought with Veronica over money. There was sort of an issue between Veronica and Tim as far as custody, and Tim was worried Veronica was going to take their son out of the country.
Would Tim kill his wife to keep from losing his son?
We went to Tim's house to notify him of Veronica's death. He didn't seem very upset, didn't seem very shaken.
Tim did start to show emotion when he started talking about how to make notification to his son that his mother had passed. Tim told us his son went to his sister's house. Tim called his sister. He told her what happened to Veronica, and he again became upset at the thought of having to tell his son what happened to his mother.
Police asked Tim to come down to the station for an interview where they questioned him about his wife's personal life.
Tell me about this boyfriend of hers. You doing these shows, you've been putting in 14, 16, 20 hours a day. She started hanging out. She just started acting weird. And then I started paying attention more. She fessed up. I said, okay. Tried therapy for a little while. Didn't work. I moved out June 6th.
Tim stated that he was upset that they were going through a divorce and that it wasn't what he wanted.
Had Veronica's relationship with another man driven Tim to kill?
Has your relationship with your wife ever been volatile? No. Was there ever any problems in the divorce? Our thing was good. Do you have any insurance that you're going to claim from this accident happening? I don't know. I have no idea. If I'm the beneficiary, then sure.
The life insurance policy on Veronica was approximately $550,000.
Tim admitted that once they were divorced, Tim would be taken off the life insurance as a beneficiary. So he was 2 to 3 weeks out from being on the life insurance policy.
Detective Crumby cuts to the chase.
Did you have anything to do with your wife's murder? Oh, sure.
When asked if he had done it, Tim reacted calm, cool.
Part of my technique in interviewing people, I like to make accusations and statements to try to throw them off.
I'm sitting there calling you a murderer. I think you are. I don't know how to respond to him. I didn't do it.
He came back at me and was adamant that he didn't.
Tim says the last time he saw Veronica was in the church parking lot at the custody exchange.
He gave us the exact route that he followed after he picked up his son and the different stops that he made.
Tim had said that he had gone to a hardware store and a grocery store near his residence. He provided receipts.
We had other detectives follow up, actually go to the store, pull surveillance tapes.
When police get a hold of the security footage, they're stunned.
The receipts that Tim had given us match up the times on the surveillance video. And we had already had a time frame of when the homicide happened, so we were able to narrow it down to where he was. Tim was not there at the residence when it happened.
Tim is cleared as a suspect, and officers have also looked into the boyfriend Brian's alibi.
Brian went to a local store for a cold drink before he came to Veronica's house. Surveillance tapes showed him at the store at the time he stated, so we knew where he was during the time we suspect the homicide happened.
Investigators are back at square one.
We don't have a known suspect. I started getting frustrated.
You know, anytime you have a homicide of this magnitude, community members, neighbors, friends are obviously worried.
Everybody was just really shocked and tried to comfort each other and try to understand what happened.
Why the hell did this happen? How did this happen? Who did it? I wanted justice for her. You know, I mean, no matter who did it, no matter what it was, I wanted answers.
Officers canvass Veronica's neighbors, asking if they saw or heard anything unusual around the time of the murder.
A neighbor stated they saw a light-colored white or silver SUV or van in the alley right before the homicide. They didn't know if it was involved or not. They stated that it was gone before the police arrived.
Did the driver have something to do with Veronica's murder? Is this the lead police have been hoping for?
We started to have some pieces to the puzzle, but at this point, we didn't have the puzzle and we didn't even have the border.
2 days after Veronica Boza's murder, police still don't have a solid suspect. Their only lead is a light-colored SUV that was seen in the alley by Veronica's house right before she was attacked.
We tried to narrow down whose vehicle that possibly could have been. We were told that maybe a handyman that comes around, so we followed up and determined that he had a dark truck.
With few leads, investigators looked to Veronica's autopsy results for insight.
The medical examiner said that she was shot 4 times. She had a defensive wound to her arm. The last time was a shot to her head to make sure that she was dead, so she was basically executed.
Well, is this a stalker? Is this a hitman? What is it? And so everybody was on alert.
While the murder weapon wasn't found at the scene, police do get one piece of good news.
Technicians ran ballistic tests on the shell casings, and that gave us a type of gun we were looking for. It was fired from a high point 9mm.
Investigators decide to track Veronica's phone for further clues.
When we have a homicide, we like to collect electronic evidence. We knew from family and friends that she had an iPhone, so we had our tech investigator follow up on cell phone records and GPS records.
We were able to see that she'd gone to church and then came back home, and then now that phone is missing.
Police believe Veronica's attacker took her phone.
The location of the cell phone was being recorded, leaving the scene of the homicide, traveling down the roads, down the interstate.
Was the signal leading police straight to Veronica's killer?
That was one key piece that really opened our eyes. It was almost as if Veronica was helping us in our investigation.
But then the signal goes dead.
So we thought that the phone had been destroyed, powered off, or just the battery died. We requested records for her current boyfriend, Brian. We determined that he was telling us the truth about where he had been, what he had been doing.
We looked at the cell phone records and the GPS locations for Tim in relation to the homicide. His cell phone was hitting on towers along the path that he stated he took.
But something else about Tim's phone records jumps out to detectives.
We noticed multiple calls to one number before and after the custody exchange.
Police learn the number belongs to Corey Cotham.
Corey Cotham was a friend of Tim's. They worked together, they hung out together, and they were very close. He was friends with Veronica, and at some point actually stayed with Tim and Veronica.
Were the calls just routine conversations between two friends, or something more sinister?
Tim had told us that he spoke with his friend Corey, but he just made it seem like it was just a matter of the fact, not a long conversation. But this was definitely a red flag to us.
But when police look closer at Corey, they find Tim and Veronica's good friend has a dark and troubling past.
We found out that he had a large number of assaults, physical assaults against women.
Corey Cotham preyed on women. He was always playing women and trying to get money. He had such a high opinion of himself. He called himself Big Man.
It's a major revelation. Was it possible Corey had something to do with Veronica's death?
Maybe there was a personal reason between him and Veronica that we didn't know about that could have been related to the homicide. We were just unsure at this point.
We then got a warrant issued for Corey's cell phone data to show what Corey had been up to that day.
The results raise immediate suspicions.
Corey's phone and Veronica's phone were both hitting in the same general area as each other. We noticed that the day of the homicide, he was in the general area of St. Edward Catholic Church, which is where Veronica went to Mass at that morning. We then noticed that his phone was in the general area of the crime scene later that morning.
When detectives track his phone's movement after the killing, they make a stunning discovery.
We noticed that Corey Cotham's device was in the area of the crime scene, then heads back out towards Interstate 40.
The route is suspiciously similar to the path Veronica's cell phone took.
We would conclude that the two devices are in close proximity to each other and that there's a good probability that the phone was taken by the suspect at that point.
Upon learning that information, we now started looking at Corey Cotham as a suspect in the murder of Veronica Boza.
Investigators come up with a plan to lure Corey into talking.
I was very nonchalant with him. Tried to play it as we needed his help to clear his buddy Tim.
Corey agrees to meet with detectives.
He didn't think our radar was up in regards to him.
Corey confirms he spoke with Tim the morning of the murder.
It was a couple of times. I know I called, but I know I called on the way back into Nashville.
He stated he was coming back from Kentucky from seeing one of his girls, and that at the time he spoke with Tim, he was passing the Portland area on the interstate.
Where were you when you talked to him at 12:20? I was already back in town. I went over one of my girls' house and just chilled with her,
He went to a girlfriend's house in Nashville, which was on the other side of town from where the homicide occurred. So he put himself way away from the homicide location.
This was significant because it showed that he was lying about where he was.
Then, investigators decide to set a trap.
One thing we had to do was put Corey's phone on his person and in his hand 100% of the time.
Is that the best way to get a hold of you, by your phone? Yeah. You always have it on you? Always. Okay. You're like me, man, 24/7. Hey, I got the car charger, the whole deal.
We were able to get Corey to admit that he always had his cell phone with him and that nobody else had the phone that day.
And that's almost as good as putting a weapon in Corey's hand.
All right, man. We appreciate you coming and talking to us, man, but we got some problems. What's wrong? We've already pulled cell phone records, all right? And what you told us is totally not what your cell phone records show.
He got fired up. He was pretty upset, pretty mad.
After Veronica Boza is found shot to death, police have caught her old friend Corey Cotham in a lie.
What if you need to start explaining why your cell phone and her cell phone take? I don't know. All right? I'm telling you, man, I ain't got nothing to do with this. I ain't got anything to do with that. I knew Veronica before I knew Tim. I ain't got nothing to do with that. That's what's crazy, dude. I came because I'm trying to bail my boy out from getting some mess.
He started to get angry, started getting frustrated.
You want a lawyer before you talk to us, or you want to talk? There's nothing I can tell y'all. I haven't done anything.
At that point, we needed his vehicle and his cell phone in relation to the investigation, and we went and obtained a search warrant for them.
When police seize Corey's vehicle, they notice striking details.
Corey had a champagne-colored Cadillac Escalade. A neighbor saw a light-colored vehicle in the alley that day of the homicide. We found a collapsible lunchbox. We found gloves and clothing, shoes, and other items that we didn't really know how they related to the scene.
If Corey is Veronica's killer, what's his motive?
Corey is definitely a dangerous person. You don't know what he's capable of.
He was a sociopath.
But with no hard evidence against him, police have to let Corey go.
Releasing him at that point was frustrating. Obviously, Corey was a top suspect at the time, but we needed to do further investigation. And
one of the things that we did with Corey's records is we looked at everybody he talked to the day of the homicide.
one of the numbers that stuck out was around 12:28 in the afternoon. So I called the number, and the person on the other end of the phone stated he used to live across from Corey.
He had stated that he had cleaned a gun for Corey a couple weeks prior.
It was a high point 9mm. Corey came to him and pulled it out of a red collapsible lunch pail. And we found a red collapsible lunch pail in the trunk of Corey's Escalade. So it started to come together at that point.
Investigators need to find the gun and connect it to Corey, but they still have a long way to go. With phone records placing him near Veronica's house at the time of her murder, police confront Corey's only alibi, his girlfriend, Jenny.
During that interview, Jenny had told us that Corey had been with her that day from 12 to 12:30 because she fixes him lunch at that time.
It's the same time Veronica was murdered. I showed her Corey's phone records and told her we knew she was lying.
Detective Crummy and myself fully explained to Jenny that lying during a murder investigation, she could go to jail.
At that point, she backed off. She actually walked away from us and she called her attorney. I didn't know her motive for lying. I didn't know if she was scared of Corey. I didn't know if she was involved in the homicide and complicit. So we had a lot of other investigation to do and a lot more digging.
Detectives still need a witness to place Corey at the scene of the murder.
We showed multiple neighbors an array of photographs of different vehicles, and one was an Escalade. They couldn't make a positive identification on what type of vehicle it was, so ultimately we couldn't use it.
It's another roadblock for police and more frustration for Veronica's family and friends.
It makes you mad that somebody would do something like that to somebody like her.
It felt twisted. It was like we couldn't get answers. We were getting all these rumors. What's the truth? What is the truth? What happened?
Investigators need a break, and they finally get one.
Jenny, Corey's girlfriend, was starting to contact the police department multiple times and wanting to speak with detectives in relation to the case.
So when we interviewed Jenny the second time, she decided to tell us what really happened.
Not sure what time he was at my house. He was at my house Sunday. I can't be certain of the time.
Now she couldn't provide an alibi for Corey. She did state she saw him that morning, but she was half asleep. When she woke up later in the afternoon, Corey was now at her house after the time of when the murder happened.
You didn't go with him? You didn't take him?
No. I did not leave my house.
Jenny does make one startling admission that's very valuable to police.
She admitted that she stole her ex-husband's handgun and put it inside a red collapsible lunchbox and hid it in her vehicle.
Whenever I thought I could get arrested for it, I was going to try to sneak it back. Whenever I went to go sneak the gun back, it was missing. And the only person that knew was Corey.
It's a major discovery. Not only is Corey's alibi shattered, police now have a lead on the possible murder weapon.
We showed Jenny a picture of the red collapsible lunchbox we found in Corey's vehicle, and she identified that as being the one that she put her handgun in after she stole it from her ex-husband. She agreed at that point to work with us to prove that she wasn't involved in the homicide.
When detectives get the results from the analysis on Corey's phone, they sense they're on the right track.
They were able to recover a picture of a high point 9mm handgun.
It's the same type of gun that was used to kill Veronica.
The one shell casing we were able to locate on the scene had a greenish tint to it. After looking at Corey's phone, the ammunition in the picture also had a greenish tint to it.
This was possibly the gun that was used in the homicide. We didn't know if Jenny gave it to Corey. Corey stole it, we didn't know. So we dug through the police reports relating to her and her ex-husband, and it just says that a handgun was stolen.
When police contact Jenny's ex, he confirms that the gun in the photo is his.
He stated it was the High Point 9mm that was stolen.
Was this the actual gun used in Veronica's murder?
Our main motive was to find ballistics that affirmatively tie the handgun that was stolen as the handgun used in the homicide to kill Veronica.
Jenny's ex also tells police he used to shoot his gun on his property.
We searched everywhere trying to find evidence, any shell casings that could have matched. As we were about to wrap up our search, our ID tech actually found one shell casing and he dug a couple more. I knew it could be a very critical turning point in the investigation if it did match.
3 hours later, detectives received the ballistics report.
It's a match. Definitely was fired from the same handgun. It was the best thing we could have done and could have to tie the handgun to the scene without actually having the handgun.
But where is the gun that was used to kill Veronica? Before investigators can lay any charges against Corey, they get an urgent call from Jenny.
She told the police Corey had planned a trip to Barbados. He was going to leave the country.
Police now believe Corey Cotham murdered Veronica Boza, but Corey's girlfriend Jenny has told detectives he's about to flee the country. They need to act fast before he slips through their fingers.
We contacted Jenny again and asked her to come in and do a controlled phone call.
I asked Jenny to wear a wire to see if Corey would talk about what had happened, and also to try to get him to come back to Tennessee where we could arrest him.
Jenny is nervous, but agrees to help police.
Hey, what's wrong? Hey, they're coming to arrest me, Corey. What do I do?
She stated that the police were coming after her, that we had a warrant for her.
They got some sort of bullet, and it matches the same thing, exact match as one that they found at the crime scene.
She stated that the detectives were able to tie the handgun that she had from her ex-husband to him, or to the homicide. She said, Corey, they know.
They're saying it's a 9mm. They can use 9mm bullets anywhere. That don't matter. That's stupid.
That was an aha moment because we never released to him or anybody else the caliber of weapon that was used.
So we were very confident in all the evidence from Cotham, which was just overwhelming that he was the killer.
But it's what Corey says next that blows investigators away.
Get in touch with Tim. Let them know what's going on.
Mr. Cotham did make a statement, you need to check with Tim and get with Tim.
For him to tell Jenny to call Tim, that let us know right then and there that Tim was involved in the homicide.
It's a surprising twist. Had Tim been involved in Veronica's death after all?
Surveillance was started on Tim that afternoon.
Mr. Boza had a big motive. He had custody issues in his marriage. He had money problems.
Tim had financial gains from the death of Veronica Boza.
$550,000 in insurance, which would have turned his life around.
While Tim had motive to kill Veronica, he didn't pull the trigger. But would he have recruited the couple's mutual friend to do his dirty work? Police take Corey into custody. Then they close in on Tim.
Officers were able to follow Tim around, and then once the warrants were obtained, Tim was arrested during a traffic stop.
Corey refuses to speak to police, but Tim is eager to talk. He tells detectives a tale so twisted, they can hardly believe it.
And I'm sorry, I lied to everybody here. There was a movie years ago. They both had terrible wives, mothers, or whatever, and they said, what did this crisscross do? And just in jest, I said, okay, hey, we should do the same thing.
It was a very crazy plan.
This homicide didn't make sense to me and how it played out. It was just unexpected.
It was definitely bizarre when he told us what the plan was.
Corey was supposed to murder Veronica, and Tim was supposed to murder one of Corey's girlfriend's ex-husband. The two of them got this idea from a Hollywood movie with the same type of plot.
The crisscross killing theory was strange. Of course, Boza claimed he thought they were joking, but I could see that Mr. Cotham really talking it up and acting like Mr. Big Man or Mr. Hitman that they could pull this off.
The day
He's murdered. He called you and says it's done.
Yes, sir, he did.
What did he say?
He just said that he went in the house and she tried to run and that he shot her.
When I talked to him, it said that Corey said it's done, which was obviously dynamite evidence for us.
Police learned Corey also had something more to gain from Veronica's death.
Tim promised to pay Corey $35,000 of the life insurance policy.
His wife was leaving him, and he just had anger and jealousy issues of the victim. He was a desperate man, and he had the strongest motive of anybody.
Corey Cotham and Tim Boza are tried separately for their roles in Veronica's murder. In court, prosecutors put forward a theory of how the crime unfolded.
The morning of the homicide, Corey went down to St. Edward Catholic Church.
The only person that could have told Corey Cotham where she was going to be that day was Mr. Boza.
While Tim runs errands to build his alibi, Corey follows Veronica home.
Veronica opens her garage door. She pulls in to park. Corey pulled right in behind her, got out of his vehicle. He was wearing a mask and gloves, and Veronica was in her vehicle and saw this. She runs into the house. Corey's chasing after her. I believe they fight in the kitchen area and in the living room area.
She fought for her life. She obviously struggled very hard to try to live.
Corey and Tim are both found guilty of first-degree premeditated murder.
Mr. Cotham got life without parole. Mr. Boza got a life sentence, which means he'll have to serve 51 years before he's eligible for parole.
Veronica was definitely an unexpected target. I can't fathom Tim would ever do something like this. He hired the hitman. He's just evil. Only a twisted person could pull something like this off. He has no soul.
The truth behind what happened, it just makes you feel sick to your stomach.
In losing Veronica, we lost one of the most amazing human beings that ever walked this earth. Miss her all the time. It's painful.
The real tragedy in this case is all the families that were destroyed. Veronica's son won't have a mother and father.
I remember her as someone who you enjoyed working with and looked forward to being around.
I think Veronica would want to be remembered as a loving soul. That simple. She's just such a bright light. And she would want that for everybody.
In 1989, residents of a close-knit apartment community in Virginia gathered for a holiday celebration. For Tammy Brannon and 5-year-old daughter Melissa, Christmas was always a special time. Then, without warning, the little girl was gone. Her disappearance ignited an impassioned search. Law enforcement and the local community spared no effort. But would they piece together the evidence and find her before it was too late?
In 1989, in front of close to 200 witnesses, a child disappeared. 5-year-old Melissa Brannon vanished from a Christmas party at her mother's apartment complex in Virginia. Children have a way of wandering off, but it soon became clear this was more than a case of a lost child. Someone had taken Melissa. What sorrow compares to a mother's grief? What kind of monster preys on children? I'm Jim Kallstrom, former director of the FBI's New York office. The hunt for Melissa galvanized the community as a nation held its breath and waited for word. All victims deserve justice. All criminals must be punished. But when a crime involves a child, the stakes become so much greater.
On December 3rd, 1989, the Woodside apartment complex in Lorton, Virginia held its Yuletide Christmas party. The Woodside was a large but friendly complex, a community that revolved around family life and children's activities. The kids were always excited about the party, which meant special treats and presents. A single mom, Tammy Brannon, had found in the Woodside complex a safe community in which to raise her only child, Melissa. As the evening wound down, Tammy stopped to visit with a friend before going home.
We'll have some pizza. How about that? Okay?
Can I go get some potato chips?
Okay, we'll come right back.
Okay.
I'm distracted down at the Really? Mm-hmm. Good for you. Yeah. Did you?
We gotta get ready.
Okay.
We have a lot to do. This kid's so big. So cute. She is. Did you see where she went?
She lost sight of her daughter for only a few seconds. But that was long enough for a mother's worst nightmare to begin.
Can you see my daughter?
Melissa? Melissa? Melissa?
Melissa disappeared. The Fairfax County, Virginia Police Department was called immediately.
Now, I'm going to do everything I can to find your little girl, but you have to tell me everything you can possibly.
Detective Bill Wilden assured Tammy they would do all they could to find her little girl. The detectives began questioning the people at the party. No one could recall seeing Melissa leave the party or anywhere near the front door.
I'm Detective Wilden. This is Rappaport with the
Richard Rappaport, the Fairfax Department's search commander, joined Detective Wilden to organize the search party.
If you come across anything suspicious, an article
He would head up the investigation.
Does everyone understand?
One of the possibilities, of course, was that she had just hidden somewhere in the building, was playing with some friends, or had wandered off. So immediately the patrol officers on the scene did a very good job of searching the building, and they began a search of the immediate area surrounding the building. The night of December 3rd was a bitterly cold night in the Washington area. Someone outside that was 5 years old without a lot of protection probably would not have survived through the night. It was that cold.
All the adults that can participate, I need you outside with flashlights.
Rappaport coordinated a more specific grid search of the area with patrol officers and dozens of volunteers from the complex. The search effort began. Nearly 100 neighbors, police, and Army personnel from nearby Fort Belvoir combed the woods around the complex. Most were parents themselves, united by a single concern: to find Melissa. Like the detectives, they expected to find a shivering and frightened little girl lost in the dark woods and crying for her mother. Officers began to question the 200 people who had attended the party and interview over 400 other Woodside residents. Though the complex was large, many residents knew Melissa and knew her to be very shy. Shocked to hear that she had disappeared, almost all expressed doubt that she would ever have gone off without her mother, and certainly not with a stranger. Detective Wilden went with Tammy to her apartment to interview her. He questioned her extensively about her past and possible troubles with her neighbors or employer. An accountant, she had never had any problems with anyone. Tammy had lived at Woodside for over 3 years since her divorce from her husband in Texas. She had experienced the normal readjustments of a newly single mom, but she and her ex-husband were on good terms. When detectives discovered an open window in the furnace room, Jim Gogan, the crime scene investigator for the Fairfax County Police Department, was asked to examine it.
Right through here?
The way the door was set up, everybody had to either go through the crowd to get out the front of the building. That was only the main door and the only door available to get out, with the exception of the hallway down to the bathrooms and the furnace room. They had large windows, and in the furnace room itself had a window, what was discovered open. And from there, the assumption was made that possibly that's how she was taken from the building.
Melissa's disappearance was suddenly far more complicated. The search for a missing child had become a possible abduction case.
Did you see her leave the party at any time?
The police continued their questioning with even greater urgency and began to hear repeated mention of the strange, even bizarre behavior of the maintenance man for the complex.
That was the last I saw.
What was his height?
Several of the women reported how offended they were by extremely vulgar sexual propositions made to them by Caleb Hughes.
There was a possibility that if she had been abducted for sexual purposes, that she might be molested, but we were very, very hopeful that we could at least find her alive before her life was in jeopardy.
Now that they were dealing with a possible abduction case, detectives returned to Tammy's apartment and collected nightgowns, hairbrushes, and bedclothes, any items bearing traces of Melissa.
Can you describe?
As detectives continued questioning the people at the party, they learned more disturbing details about Hughes' behavior that night. He had spent what seemed to many to be an unusual amount of time playing games with the children. He made the parents uneasy by touching the kids. There was something unsettling, something indecent about him.
At the party, he was not dressed as well as the rest of the people. He wore his work clothes. He mingled with some of the people he knew at the party, and he spent some time talking with Melissa's mother, making comments about Melissa, and offered to take Melissa and a couple of other children to the restroom if they needed to go. He just had some very suspicious behavior from a man of his age around the children.
With growing suspicion, the detectives tried repeatedly to reach Hughes by phone, and then went to his house, but were told by his wife that she had no idea where he might be.
Were you playing with her tonight?
He had left the party sometime before our arrival there. He lived only 4 miles away, but it took us several hours for us to contact him because he had not yet returned home.
Finally, 2.5 hours after Melissa's disappearance, Caleb Hughes called the police, who then returned to his house. Upon questioning, he claimed he had simply taken the long way home. The officers immediately noticed he was wearing different clothing from that reported by witnesses at the party.
I washed clothes tonight when I got home.
Did you see them?
They're in the washing machine over there.
In the washing machine, they found the clothes Hughes had been wearing, as well as his sneakers and a leather belt with a knife sheath. The knife was missing.
You washed your shoes at 2 a.m. in the morning?
Yeah.
He'd been gone for several hours, and to come home in the middle of the night when your family was asleep and to feel the immediate need to wash everything you had been wearing, including your shoes, we found that rather suspicious behavior, and that just further added to our interest in his whereabouts.
As Hughes appeared reluctant to speak in front of his wife, the officers decided to take him to headquarters for further questioning. Suspecting that Hughes might be covering for time spent with a girlfriend, the officers wanted to allow him the opportunity to tell the real story.
Do you know Melissa Brannon?
No, I do not.
To the detective's surprise, there was no real story. Hughes had no alibi. He claimed he had no idea who Melissa was, that he had driven the long way home
Why were you
alone
washing your
after
shoes?
picking up a six-pack, and then had simply washed his clothes.
You normally wash your shoes with your clothes?
Sometimes, yeah.
What were they dirty with?
He said as an excuse that they were his only work clothes and he had to be to work the next day and they were dirty, so he needed to clean them. for work.
Look, am I being charged with anything?
Despite hours of intense questioning, Hughes remained
not
smug
right now.
and evasive.
I'm free to go.
Finally,
Yeah, you're free to
Detective
go.
Wilden told him he was free to go,
But I know you're
though he
guilty.
was almost certain Hughes was lying.
Well, you're gonna have to prove it then, aren't you?
As far as the Fairfax County Police Department was concerned, Caleb Hughes was the prime suspect. Believing Caleb Hughes was involved in Melissa's disappearance, Detective Bill Wilden contacted Fairfax County Commonwealth Attorney Robert Horan.
It was a suspected homicide, certainly by then. He made some statements that were out of character for somebody who really is a suspect in a crime of this nature. You would normally think the minute somebody would suggest you or I have abducted a 5-year-old child,
Look, am I
I
free
mean,
to
you
go?
would think it would be
Am I
the
being
most
charged?
vigorous, vehement outburst. Of course I didn't. Well, they got nothing like that. Matter of fact, at one point he said to Wilden, "Prove it," which is again an unusual reaction for somebody who had nothing to do with it.
Gauguin had photocopied Melissa's picture and printed hundreds of flyers to help in the search.
And as the sun came up, the search expanded into further down south on the highway. They sent soldiers out to do massive searches through the woods along the railroad tracks, and as possible ideas of locations where she might have been were developed, again, hundreds of people were gathered to search and walk those areas.
The car Hughes had been driving that night belonged to his wife. She gave investigators permission to impound and search it. Detectives examined it for fingerprints, blood, fibers, hair, any evidence that would document Melissa's presence there. Fingerprint tests revealed that only the Hughes family had left prints on the car. Next, all the hairs and fibers needed to be collected from the interior. This type of trace evidence was usually retrieved with a vacuum cleaner, but there was simply too much debris inside.
When I first approached the car and looked inside, I just kind of went, whoa. They had 2 large dogs, the Hughes. They carried them a lot in that car. It was just cluttered with dirt and debris and just a mess inside that car. And I just kind of shook my head like this was going to be a real challenge. So I decided to use the masking tape as an alternative to the vacuum cleaner, just hoping to just get what was on the surface.
That was an unusual technique, certainly. In my years, that was the first time I ever had run into it in the Fairfax Police Department. And it's a very common technique now.
Gauguin then placed the tape between layers of clear plastic so that it could be examined intact under a microscope. As the car processing continued, Melissa's disappearance quickly became the lead news story in the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area.
Melissa Brannon is 3 feet tall, 48 pounds, with blue eyes and dark blonde, shoulder-length hair. She was last seen wearing a pink ski jacket, red plaid skirt, and black shoes with gold buckles.
The night of the party, Melissa had been wearing a navy blue acrylic sweater with a Sesame Street Big Bird picture, red tights, a red cotton plaid skirt, and a pink parka.
When I found the red-blue fibers that were visible on the tape, I did kind of get excited about that. But at the time, I was excited but worried because we needed to find her to identify the clothes, the possible clothes. Without Melissa, that was going to be real tough.
When Gauguin conducted luminol testing on the interior of Hughes's car, he found traces of blood on the steering wheel, brake pedal, and floor mat. When a light is shined on the luminol-treated area, bloodstains will appear fluorescent. While the luminol process is quite accurate as a blood locator, it can also destroy the genetic characteristics of the sample.
When I sprayed the steering wheel, I got the reaction on the steering wheel and as well as on the pedals of the vehicle. That's where it fell to. These items were swabbed and collected.
Hughes's shoes had been washed, but the lab was able to identify possible blood stains on their soles where fresh cuts had been made.
It became very suspicious when I received the clothes from the officers who searched the house and noticed that he had cut his tennis shoes. Kind of putting two and two together, that why was he cutting his tennis shoes and why did I get a reaction to blood on the gas pedals?
Surely Caleb Hughes had tried to cover his tracks to avoid a link to an unimaginable crime.
What is your name? Caleb Hughes. How old are you?
With the luminol findings showing blood in his car, the detectives were increasingly confident they could get a confession from Hughes. He was brought in for a polygraph test. He had no explanations for the fresh cuts on his shoes.
No.
Once again, he gave no explanation for the 2-hour, 30-minute delay in getting home.
But as it turned out, there never was an explanation. He said, I just took the long way home. It was the best they got.
Did you harm Melissa Brannon? No. Did you kill Melissa Brannon? No. These are proven to be deceptive.
When Hughes denied outright that he had killed Melissa, polygraph examiner Rick Danielle was sure he was lying.
He really denied ever having seen this child, denied knowing who the child was. He was showing pictures of her, never seen that child before. And of course the police knew that was not true because he had been at the same table with the child, had talked to the child.
You got the wrong guy. I'm asking you about what you did. You got the wrong guy.
Danielle was absolutely satisfied he was hiding something, that he was lying about something.
I'm out of here.
He was attempting to deceive him. But of course, none of that under Virginia law, as you may know, that's evidence. You're not allowed to use it at trial.
Investigators were convinced Hughes had abducted and harmed the beautiful little girl. But Tammy Brannon tried to keep her hope alive, fighting her worst fears. Melissa's Christmas presents waited under the tree.
News 7 has confirmed tonight that the investigation into the disappearance of 5-year-old Melissa Brannon appears to be focusing on one primary suspect. Police will continue their search efforts and to pursue leads. There is now a $10,000 reward for any information concerning Melissa's whereabouts.
For Tammy Brannon and her parents, the hours passed in an agonizing wait for more information. Melissa's disappearance electrified the tiny rural community of Lorton, a suburb of Washington, D.C. Only 5 months earlier, 10-year-old Rosie Gordon had been bike riding in her neighborhood when she was abducted, raped, and murdered. Her killer had never been found.
Nice to meet you too.
Rosie's mother quickly came to Tammy Brannon's support.
The yellow ribbons that punctuate trees and balconies at the Woodside apartment complex in Lorton have weathered
Once Melissa's
3
disappearance was
snowstorms.
reported
They've
on the
held their
news,
position
the community
fear
rushed
and
to her support.
speculation as to the
Yellow
whereabouts
ribbons
of
began
5-year-old
appearing on
Melissa
Christmas
Brannon.
trees throughout the area.
By all indications, Tammy was a wonderful mother, very loving mother, very, very protective of her child. Melissa was her only child, and I just think all those facts together struck a chord that virtually anyone could identify with those circumstances, and people's hearts went out to the Brannon family.
Hundreds of people volunteered to post flyers throughout the region and assist the local authorities in their search. A new expert was also brought into the search effort. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children sent John Gold, one of their search and rescue consultants.
We are legislated into being as the state clearinghouse for all the information regarding missing persons. And we also assist families and law enforcement, kind of as a liaison between the two, working as many cases as we can.
11 and a
After debriefing, Gold and his partner went directly to the apartment complex clubhouse.
Check your stride out here.
Outside, they found adult male footprints leading from the furnace room window to a split rail fence whose top rail had recently been broken.
We began to find transferences on the other side of the fence into a small parking lot there beside the clubhouse, in the parking lot, I think, with an abandoned restaurant or some type of building there. And that's where the track stopped.
Straight through here, over this fence.
Right from the beginning, we found the adult footprints, but we never found a child's footprints. So we felt comfortable that if that was the abductor we were looking for, and we felt pretty comfortable that it was, that Melissa was probably being carried even from outside the window, was being carried by the abductor to the point where she and the abductor got in the vehicle.
But where would Hughes have taken her?
I don't know.
Detectives received a lucky break when they interviewed Hughes's wife.
She had been somewhat suspicious that he might go somewhere else after work. She didn't want him to go anywhere except to work and directly back home. And so unbeknownst to him, she had made a note of what the mileage was. And the following day told us that she had checked the mileage again and that 12 miles had been put on the car. We now had another piece of possible information about the extent to which he could have gone that night. We first marked the location of the crime. This was the apartment complex in southern Fairfax County. We next located Caleb Hughes' residence, which was in northern Prince William County, roughly in this area. We then took a string that was the equivalent of 12 linear miles and tied the two ends of the string together and placed them over the pins. So we simply took a pencil and defined that area so that any point at the end of that string represented the outer limits of the search that was conducted on December the 8th.
Within 3 days of Melissa Brannon's disappearance, investigators had organized a 25-square-mile joint search with the Army, Police Department, Civil Air Patrol, and Coast Guard. Over 500 volunteers turned out for the effort.
We have a 12-mile radius that we need to cover.
Black patent leather shoes, with gold bows, and clean fitted jacket.
We had dozens of search teams that were comprised of trained law enforcement people, civilian volunteers, and military personnel. They were doing step-by-step searches of defined areas. Each area had been broken down and was assigned to a team.
We're going to be looking for the clothing a lot. That's going to be one of the main things.
They had specific instructions on how to search. If they found anything which they thought might be evidence, they were to mark it, not to disturb it, and we had teams of crime scene people who would then respond to that particular location and process the evidence.
At this point, we've not found anything today that puts us any closer than we were this morning.
The volunteers were frustrated and extremely disappointed.
I know there were nights when I would go home and my family would have seen a newscast about another day of searching, and my own children would say, "Daddy, are you going to find that little girl? When are you going to find that little girl?" And I think that was a conversation that was occurring in the homes of dozens of investigators and police officers involved in this case.
While the search continued, Gogan approached the nearby FBI lab with the evidence he had processed from the car. Because Melissa was still missing, the FBI's state-of-the-art technology would be critical in establishing the connection between the hair, fibers, and bloodstains collected and Melissa Brannon. Agent Doug Diedrich of the FBI's Trace Evidence Unit would examine the evidence. Perhaps he could find a link to Melissa Brannon.
There you have to go to extraordinary measures to try to recreate, if at all possible, the environment of the victim, most recent environment, and also the types of hairs that the victim may have, the type of clothing that the victim may have been wearing the night of the disappearance. And that's the difficult part.
As long as Melissa was still missing, filing charges against Caleb Hughes was all but impossible unless compelling evidence could be found. Diedrich and the lab examiners were impressed by the large number of fibers that had transferred onto the passenger seat of Hughes's car. Fairfax County investigators had identified nearly 70 different fibers.
That included the blue acrylic fibers, the red cotton fibers, the black rabbit hairs, and there were, I believe, 1 or 2 head hairs in the case. But that's monumental. Sounds like a small number. That's huge.
Once the FBI entered the case, its agents conducted their own investigation of Hughes's house. When Caleb Hughes's name was released as the primary and only suspect in the case, a media frenzy followed.
Hughes has not been charged in the case, but he is the target of round-the-clock surveillance by the FBI. Federal investigators working with police from Fairfax County last night executed a search warrant on the groundskeeper's rented townhouse. They recovered several items which have been taken to the FBI laboratory to be tested to see if there is any evidence linking this man to Melissa. In the meantime, the FBI's official comment is no comment.
The FBI brought the power of a federal grand jury to the investigation. The grand jury ordered Hughes to submit to blood and other forensic tests, something the local authorities had not been able to order. Hughes complained bitterly in interviews that his life had been ruined by the invasion. Details of a troubled past emerged. Hughes grew up in an abusive, dysfunctional home. He had a record as a juvenile delinquent, a long history of drug and alcohol abuse, and a disturbing attraction toward children.
As an adult, he had been convicted of larceny. He had been convicted of car theft. He had been convicted of contributing to the delinquency of a minor. The evidence indicated that he did spend a lot of time with young children, nobody the age of Melissa Brannon, but certainly a lot of children in their early teens.
In the lab, FBI examiners had begun analyzing the stains on the soles of Hughes's shoes. Though luminol testing had damaged the samples taken from Hughes's car, they became increasingly convinced that these minute traces contained blood serum proteins that could determine the crucial connection to Melissa.
This blood's been...
The samples were submitted for DNA and serology tests.
Make different slide, for sure.
15 days after Melissa's abduction, a candlelight vigil for Melissa was held at the apartment complex. The little girl's disappearance had united the Fairfax community in compassion and outrage.
And during that whole Christmas season of 1989, that every night on the 6 o'clock news, you saw the video shot that her grandfather had taken of Melissa Brannon. And I'm sure I was like many people in the metropolitan area of Washington who felt that they knew her from seeing this lovely child every night on television.
But shortly after New Year's, a judge in the next county received a letter from Hughes's probation officer informing him that Hughes had violated probation for an auto theft conviction 2 years earlier. On January 24th, the judge revoked Hughes's probation, and he was finally put behind bars. The earliest he could be released was November, giving the Fairfax County prosecutor ample time to build his case. Without sufficient evidence to file charges, Hughes had remained free. But now, with Hughes safely put away, the FBI had the time needed for the extensive testing required by the trace evidence. There was still a chance Melissa's body might be found, but without it, the case against Hughes would have to be made in the FBI lab. Already, FBI examiner Doug Diedrich had found his first big break in the case.
I remembered some black animal hairs in the debris from the front seats of the car. And in looking through the little girl's nightshirt, I noticed these similar black hairs sticking out of the nightshirt. So it just rang a bell. I went back, mounted those up on slides and compared them, and sure enough, dyed rabbit hair, and they matched each other.
The rabbit hairs from Hughes's car and those found on Melissa's nightgown both revealed a distinctive corncob texturing. An exact microscopic match. Agent Diedrich immediately called the prosecutor to determine whether Tammy Brannan owned a rabbit fur coat. Not only was it confirmed that Tammy Brannan owned a rabbit fur coat, she had worn it to the Christmas party. Her mother had bought it in Germany, and it was dyed an extremely rare bluish-black color almost unknown in the United States. Melissa had handled the coat at the party and at home. Diedrich had made the crucial connection between Melissa and the car of Caleb Hughes.
So you not only, you tied those rabbit hairs, you tied that match not only to the fur coat of her mother, you tied it to the front seat of the car, but you also tied it to the child's environment itself, the rabbit hairs on the shirt of the child.
To me, that was a significant point in the case, because then it starts pushing me in the direction of we might have something. And from there, it was a matter of digging some more, see if I couldn't find some additional fibers that may be of value. So I started digging a little bit more, starting looking a little closer, asking questions of myself, asking questions of the evidence, because it's speaking. Strange, but it's speaking to me.
As week after week passed, Melissa's name eventually disappeared from the news. Life in Fairfax County had returned to normal, but Tammy Brannan was still no closer to finding her child.
It's tremendously difficult for the family to come to terms with everything that has gone on, to come to terms with still trying to hold on to that glimmer of hope that their child's alive, and then the realization that in all likelihood, they may never find their child alive or may never find the body of their child even after they've been murdered.
Tammy was forced to face the reality that by now, there was almost no chance Melissa could still be alive.
We wanted to close this case and not just close the case in the sense of identifying and prosecuting a suspect, but we wanted to bring real closure to the case in answering the question, what happened to Melissa Brannan that night? Why did it happen?
Such questions plagued Tammy Brannan. Depressed and unable to work, she remained secluded in her apartment, waiting. Agent Diedrich had examined the blue acrylic and red cotton fibers in the passenger seat evidence collected by Jim Gogan. At first glance, they appeared to match descriptions he had been given of the red tights and big bird sweater Melissa wore that night. But without a duplicate outfit to make an exact fiber comparison, he was at a dead end.
And so I went home, spoke to my wife. Of course, she straightened me out right away that if it had a big bird on it, it wasn't Winnie the Pooh, and it had to be sold at JCPenney's, having young kids of my own about the same age.
Diedrich asked his wife if she kept any old JCPenney catalogs in the house from the last few years. She said she knew she had a Christmas catalog.
Teased me about being a pack rat. I think
Diedrich was astonished to find a picture of an outfit that exactly matched the description of that worn by Melissa.
JCPenney's catalog. I collected it 2 years ago at Christmas.
Oh, great.
The FBI contacted JCPenney, and the store began a search of its records. For more than 2 months, Tammy Brannan had anxiously waited by the phone for some kind of information or word about her daughter.
Where is she?
Then, completely unexpectedly, she received a phone call. A man's voice told her he was holding Melissa for ransom and that she must deliver $75,000 the next day, or her little girl would be seriously hurt.
Can I talk to her?
Had Melissa been found?
Yes. Yes.
The national statistics will tell you that a child who's abducted by a stranger is usually dead within 3 hours of the abduction. So the likelihood of Melissa being alive months after the abduction is extremely slim.
Mom, they have Melissa.
Tammy immediately called her mother, but Detective Wilden cautioned them not to let their hopes get too high.
No, don't call anyone. I'll tell you all about it. Just come over right now.
Once again, Melissa Brannon was about to become front page news. Detective Wilden had instructed Tammy Brannon to cooperate with the ransom demands in the hopes her daughter would be recovered alive. As extortion falls under federal guidelines, the FBI coordinated the ransom drop. The FBI SWAT team was ready when two young men showed up in the parking lot to pick up the money.
I see them getting ready to open up the door. I got the bag. Go. Here we go.
FBI, freeze! On the ground!
They were quickly arrested. But did they have Melissa in their possession?
The information provided in the ransom call was so vague and so generalized, it's entirely possible that the person who called may have picked up that information simply by watching the news or reading the newspaper. Usually if there's a ransom demand that is legitimate, they're going to have very specific information that would be known only to the abductor and probably some of the investigators.
The two arrested youths were former students and roommates from a nearby university who had seen an opportunity to make some easy money out of Tammy Brannon's tragedy. They were convicted of 5 counts, including conspiracy and extortion, in the United States District Court in Alexandria, Virginia.
Turned out to be just a terrible hoax. I mean, just terrible. The notion that you would do that deliberately to a mother who was going through what she was going through.
There were copious amounts of dog hairs in the tape samples collected by Fairfax County crime scene investigator Jim Gogan, as well as dozens of human hairs. FBI lab examiners separated and painstakingly subjected each one to testing. Finally, a hair was found that was different from the others. The hair was a very light blonde, the only one of its type found in the vehicle. But it was an exact match with the hairs found in Melissa's hairbrush. Matching the human hair with Melissa was the second big match for Diedrich. But the critical link of Melissa's clothes to the fibers from Hughes's car was incomplete without a duplicate Big Bird outfit to analyze. Because it had been a special Christmas outfit, produced only once, it could not be found in stock. JCPenney gave the FBI a list of people who had purchased the outfit from its catalog division.
They then sent FBI agents out across the country to locate those people and determine if they still had the Big Bird outfit that they had bought from the JCPenney catalog, and ultimately they were able to locate a sample outfit from a family that still had the outfit.
Obtaining the outfit could mean the difference between conviction and acquittal in the case. The FBI asked the family traced through the JCPenney records to send it to their crime lab.
Well, I remember that day pretty clearly. I knew the outfit was coming in. The fiber color, according to the color in the catalog, was navy blue, but the fibers that I was finding were sort of purplish blue. So I was a little anxious that maybe this wasn't the same outfit, that maybe we were going in the wrong direction. So when that package came, I was, again, uncomfortable with even opening it, because I thought I was on the right track, but I didn't want to be wrong. I opened up the box, and sure enough, it had a purplish coloration to it. So it kind of gave me a nice, warm, fuzzy feeling there that I might have the right color anyway.
Fibers were pulled from the red cotton skirt and the blue acrylic sweater. A thorough analysis of the fibers from the outfit indicated an identical match with the fibers from Hughes's car. From the red cotton threads to the blue acrylic yarns to the yellow cross threads from the plaid skirt, the duplicate Big Bird outfit matched in every respect with the car fibers.
What I was finding was meaningful evidence that an abduction had taken place, that in fact the victim, in all likelihood, had been in the front seat of the subject's car.
With the new evidence, the prosecution could now piece together the actions of Caleb Hughes on the night Melissa disappeared. At the party, Hughes had tried to pick up several adult women, but when they rejected him, he sought a substitute.
There you go. Smile.
Fueled by frustration and alcohol, Caleb Hughes became a desperate predator with a perverse desire. His stalking eye fell upon the children. He waited and watched until an opportunity presented itself.
Bye.
When it did, Caleb Hughes seized an innocent and trusting child.
Hey, Melissa. Hey. Remember me? Come here.
By abducting Melissa Brannon, Hughes had crossed the boundary into the unspeakable.
We got to like we should catch up with each other. Okay. We don't.
The analysis of the duplicate Big Bird outfit produced compelling evidence. It would be a powerful tool in the case against a man who investigators felt was a ruthless child molester and murderer. But Agent Diedrich had to convince the jury how incredibly unlikely it would be that these fibers had come from any source other than Melissa's outfit. He began asking people at the FBI to give him any items they may have made of navy blue acrylic. He collected more than 100.
And the objective was to see, do the fibers that I found on the front seat of Cal Hughes' car, do they match any of these? The answer was no.
From the items, Diedrich collected 126 different acrylic fibers. He made 7,983 comparison tests with those fibers against the ones found in Hughes's car. Out of almost 8,000 tests, only one succeeded in making an exact microscopic match with the blue acrylic fibers found in Hughes's car. And that was the duplicate Big Bird outfit.
Whenever you match two things, it has a lot of significance. These aren't random events. These, in most cases, occur. Is it possible? You can't deny the possibility that it could be a coincidence. But after looking at this stuff for a lot of years, I'm not a big believer in coincidence.
3 weeks before the trial was scheduled to begin, as investigators made final preparations for the case, a stunning development occurred. They received a phone call. 2 counties away, police had just found the body of a child on the median strip of Interstate 95.
I'll be right there.
I called Weldon. We got in his car, and there was absolutely no doubt in my mind that that was going to be it, because Hughes knew that area, spent time down in that area. I said, wow, this is going to be it.
That section of median on I-95 is wide and densely wooded. It would have been easy for Hughes to pull over, hide the body among the thick vegetation, and drive off unnoticed, and there would be little chance of someone finding the remains. But someone found a body. Was it Melissa's? If it was Melissa Brannon's body in the highway median, Fairfax County Commonwealth Attorney Robert Horan felt he could put Hughes behind bars on murder one charges. His hopes were high, but they were soon dashed.
As soon as we got there, as soon as I saw it, I knew it wasn't Melissa Brannon, because the skeleton had rings on 3 fingers. But it was a young girl. She's 13, 14-year-old who had been in that media for 2 growing seasons.
The young girl's body was never identified. Finally, nearly 1 year after Melissa's disappearance, Hughes was arrested on a grand jury indictment for abducting Melissa Brannon. He was transferred from the Prince William County Jail to the Fairfax County Jail. Moran had delayed the indictment for several months in the hope that Melissa's body would be found.
By then, I know we were all pretty satisfied that the worst had happened to the child. Unfortunately, under Virginia law, you can charge somebody with murder without the body, but you have to be able to prove where the murder occurred. And of course, without the body in this case, we had no way of proving where it occurred, so we couldn't charge him with murder.
Abduction with intent to defile was the strongest case that could be brought against him. Hughes pleaded not guilty. Few people in Fairfax County believed that Melissa could still be alive. But everyone, most of all Tammy Brannon, needed to know what had happened and needed to see justice served.
Because it's tremendously important that the family of that child had definitive answers, that they know what happened to their child, even if the news is not pleasant. They need to understand exactly with concrete information what happened to their child. They need to be able to have closure. They need to be able to give that child the burial that they deserve and go on with their lives.
With Agent Diedrich's airtight analysis of the trace evidence, Robert Horan went into the trial confident that he could convince the jury beyond reasonable doubt. The trial began on February 26, 1991.
Looking good.
A chief part of Horan's strategy was depicting Hughes' deviant sexual behavior at the party. He produced several female witnesses who recalled the crude, vulgar sexual propositions he had made to them, and others who testified he had spent considerable time playing with Melissa and had been talking to her just before she disappeared. His behavior was even more extreme, trying to eliminate the evidence. Washing his clothes, his leather belt, his shoes. He could not account for the fresh cuts on the soles of his shoes. Nor could he account for his whereabouts for the 2.5 hours between leaving the party and arriving home.
But the problem for the defense is somehow you had to explain that time. And there was never an explanation. I mean, it would have gutted our case. Our case is over if you can explain any of that time.
Though tests for blood on the shoes had proved inconclusive, the prosecution was now able to show the jury the exact matches made between the rabbit hairs, the head hair, and the fibers found in Hughes's car. Nonetheless, the defense argued that all of the fiber and hair evidence was purely circumstantial.
It may be circumstantial, but it is powerful circumstantial evidence because it doesn't change.
In order to obtain the maximum sentence for Hughes, Horan needed to convince the jury that Hughes had intended to defile Melissa once he had her in his car.
And the only way the fibers from her outfit would have been found on the seat is that her coat had been removed while she was in that car.
The prosecution charged that Hughes could only have removed Melissa's coat for one purpose, an attempt to defile.
The true answer is that that 5-year-old was seated against her will in the front seat of that vehicle.
Caleb Hughes's trial lasted 8 days. After 9 hours of deliberation, the jury found him guilty of abducting Melissa Brannon with intent to defile. He was sentenced to 50 years in prison.
For the family members, it can't end because of the eternal hope, if you will, that someday this child that's never been seen, never been found, this child someday will appear. You know, and that's hard stuff. That is hard stuff.
Caleb Hughes is still serving his sentence today, and the body of Melissa Brannon has never been found. Eventually, Tammy Brannon moved from the Woodside apartment complex, but she never changed the telephone number that Melissa had memorized by heart, hoping that one day a call might come.